The words hit him wrong, but Carter pushed the feeling down. This was his life now. Practical decisions, perfect appearances, everything measured by its value in his world of wealth and influence. What would you sacrifice for someone you love? How far would you go before crossing your own boundaries? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The cathedral doors burst open as Carter Whitmore adjusted his platinum cufflinks, 3 minutes before saying "I do" to Seattle's most photographed influencer. The string quartet played soft, delicate notes when suddenly a small voice cut through the wedding march like a knife through silk. "Daddy?" 200 guests turned in stunned silence. There, standing in a marble aisle, was a 5-year-old boy with Carter's exact dimple and birthmark pointing directly at the groom. What would you do if your biggest secret walked into your wedding? Have you ever had your past collide with your present at the worst possible moment? This is about a man who thought he could bury his mistakes with money and status. But what happens when the truth has a face, a voice, and calls you daddy in front of everyone you know? The bride gasped. Security moved forward. Camerafones lifted. And in that split second, everything, the wedding, the reputation, the carefully constructed life, came crashing down. Stay with me because what unfolds next will make you question everything you think you know about family, power, and the price of silence. Let me take you back to where this collision course began. 3 weeks earlier, when Carter Whitmore thought hiring a nanny was the simplest decision he'd ever make. He had everything money could buy, except the one thing that mattered when a ghost from his past walked through his front door. Carter Whitmore stood in his Seattle penthouse. The Space Needle gleaming outside floor-to-ceiling windows like a steel reminder of how high he'd climbed. At 34, he owned the city's hottest tech company, drove cars that cost more than most people's homes, and was 3 weeks away from marrying Candace Delaney, the Instagram influencer whose highlight reels made their relationship look like a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't usually involve hiring nannies for your dead brother's kid. "Emma needs stability," he muttered, scrolling through applications on his tablet. His 6-year-old niece had been living with him for 8 months since the car accident, and between board meetings and wedding planning, he barely saw her except at breakfast. Candace lounged on the white leather couch, her phone permanently attached to her manicured fingers. "Just pick someone qualified, babe. I can't deal with kid drama right now. The wedding photographer wants to do a pre-shoot tomorrow, and my followers are expecting content." She said it like Emma was a minor inconvenience, not a grieving child who'd lost everything. Carter's jaw tightened. "She's family, Candace, and she'll be fine with professional help." Candace didn't look up from her screen, where she was editing photos of her engagement ring. "Besides, after the honeymoon, we could discuss boarding schools. Kids her age adapt quickly." The words hit him wrong, but Carter pushed the feeling down. This was his life now. Practical decisions, perfect appearances, everything measured by its value in his world of wealth and influence. He returned to the applications, each resume a careful balance of credentials and discretion. Margaret Thompson, 55, 20 years of experience with high-profile families. Jennifer Liu, bilingual Montessori certified, references from tech executives. Sarah Williams, former teacher, specialized in trauma counseling. Then he saw the last one, Rochelle Davis, Birmingham, Alabama, 28 years old. The photo showed a woman with warm brown eyes and natural hair, pulled back in a simple style. Something about her face stirred a memory he couldn't quite place, a feeling that made his chest tighten with recognition he refused to acknowledge. "What about this one?" he asked, turning the tablet toward Candace. She glanced up, wrinkled her nose. "Kind of ordinary, don't you think? I mean, what will people say when they see her at family events? The Williams woman looks more appropriate." The comment made Carter's stomach turn, but before he could respond, Emma's voice echoed from the hallway. "Uncle Carter, I had another bad dream." He found her standing in his bedroom doorway, clutching the stuffed elephant that never left her side. Her dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and her eyes held that lost look that broke his heart every time. "Come here, kiddo." He scooped her up, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. Want to tell me about it? Mommy and Daddy were calling for me, but I couldn't find them anywhere. Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. They sounded scared. Carter's throat tightened. 8 months, and the nightmares still came. Maybe Candace was right about needing professional help, but not the kind she meant. As he carried Emma back to her room, his mind drifted to the application. Something about Rochelle Davis felt, right? Different. Like maybe she'd understand what a little girl needed when the world stopped making sense. What would you sacrifice for someone you love? How far would you go before crossing your own boundaries? Tell me in the comments below. The next morning, he made the call that would change everything. As he dialed Rochelle's number, he had no idea the woman who would answer was carrying a secret that would detonate his perfectly constructed world in exactly 21 days. She arrived carrying more than just suitcases. She brought a 5-year-old secret that would detonate his perfectly constructed world. Rochelle Davis stepped out of the taxi on Pine Street. Her son Malik pressed against her side as they stared up at the glass tower that scraped Seattle's cloudy sky. The building looked like it belonged in a movie, all clean lines and money, so different from the Birmingham neighborhoods where broken streetlights and corner stores painted a different kind of American dream. Mama, is this really where we're going to live? Malik's voice was small, his dark eyes wide as he clutched his backpack with both hands. Just temporarily, baby. She squeezed his shoulder, her own stomach churning with nerves she couldn't let him see. Remember what we talked about? We keep to ourselves, we do our job, and we save money for our own place. The doorman's uniform probably cost more than her monthly rent back home, but he smiled genuine and kind as he helped with their bags. You must be Ms. Davis. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to another planet. Malik pressed his face to the glass wall, watching the city shrink below while Rochelle tried to calm her racing heart. She'd taken this job for one reason. The money was too good to refuse, and Malik needed stability. She couldn't provide waiting tables and cleaning offices. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and Rochelle's breath caught. The Space Needle filled the windows like a postcard, and everything gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that whispered expensive. Then she saw him. Carter Whitmore stood near the kitchen island, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing as he talked business. Tall, broad shoulders filling out a casual button-down shirt. Dark hair slightly messed like he'd been running his fingers through it. When he turned toward them, ending his call, his blue eyes met hers, and something electric shot through her chest. Recognition. Impossible, but there it was. Ms. Davis. His voice was deeper than she remembered from their phone interview, with just a hint of roughness around the edges. Welcome to Seattle, Mr. Whitmore. She kept her voice steady, professional, even as her pulse jumped. This is my son, Malik. Malik stepped half behind her leg, suddenly shy, but his curious eyes never left Carter's face. Hey there, buddy. Carter crouched to Malik's eye level, and Rochelle's heart did something dangerous when she saw genuine warmth in his expression. I've got a niece about your age. Think you two might get along. Before Malik could answer, heels clicked against marble, and Candace Delaney appeared like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Blonde hair in perfect waves, makeup flawless even at 10 in the morning, wearing a white dress that probably cost more than Rochelle's car. Oh, Candace's smile was bright and cold as winter sunshine. You're here. The way she said it made Rochelle's spine straighten. She'd heard that tone before, the careful politeness that meant you know your place, and it's not here. Candace, this is Rochelle and her son Malik, Carter said, rising to his full height. Rochelle, my fiancée. Of course. Candace's eyes swept over them both, cataloging and dismissing in the same glance. Well, I'm sure you'll want to get settled. The help's quarters are quite comfortable. The help's quarters. Not the guest room, not their new home. The help's quarters. I'll show you around, Carter said quickly, shooting Candace a look Rochelle couldn't quite read. As he led them through the penthouse, pointing out rooms and explaining routines, Rochelle tried to focus on his words instead of the way he moved, the way his voice wrapped around her name like silk, the way Malik seemed drawn to him despite his usual shyness with strangers. "Mr. Whitmore," she said when they reached the bedroom that would be theirs, voice careful but steady. "I just need you to know, my son and I, we keep to ourselves. No complications." He paused in the doorway, those blue eyes studying her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "No complications," he repeated. "Got it." But the way he looked at her said complications had already walked through his front door. Have you ever met someone and felt instant recognition you couldn't explain? Share your most unexpected connection story below. That night, as Malik played with Emma in their laughter-filled rooms that had been too quiet for too long, Carter caught himself staring. Not at Rochelle, but at the little boy whose laugh sounded hauntingly familiar, whose smile held echoes of someone he used to be. Memory is a hunter. It stalks quietly until the moment it strikes with devastating precision. 3 days into their new routine, Carter found himself inventing reasons to be home. Board meetings that could be handled by video call. Dinners with investors suddenly rescheduled. He told himself it was about Emma, about making sure the transition was going smoothly, but the truth sat heavy in his chest every time Rochelle's laugh drifted from the kitchen. He'd never heard Emma giggle like that before. "She's teaching me how to make cornbread," Emma announced, bursting into his office with flour in her hair and joy on her face. Real cornbread, not the kind that comes from box. Through his office window, Carter could see Rochelle at the kitchen island, Malik perched on a stool beside her, both of them covered in ingredients as they worked. The late afternoon sun caught the gold in her brown skin, and something twisted in his chest, part longing, part memory trying to surface. Birmingham, 6 years ago. A hotel bar after the worst day of his professional life, when his startup had almost died and his father's voice echoed in his head. "You'll never amount to anything, just like your brother." He'd been drowning his failures in whiskey when she'd slid onto the bar stool next to him. Not Rochelle. He was sure of that, but someone with the same warmth in her eyes, the same soft Alabama accent that made even sad words sound like music. What was her name? Denise? Delilah? The memory stayed frustratingly blurred, like looking through frosted glass. He remembered pain, hers and his, and finding comfort in a stranger's arms. One night, no names exchanged, no promises made. Just two broken people helping each other forget for a few hours. But that couldn't be connected to this. Could it? Uncle Carter? Emma's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are you listening?" "Sorry, kiddo. Tell me about the cornbread." Rochelle says her mama taught her the recipe, and her mama's mama taught her, and it goes all the way back to great-great-great-grandmama in Mississippi. Emma's eyes were bright with the kind of family stories she'd never had. She says food is how we keep people close, even when they're far away. Carter's throat tightened. Emma had lost her parents 8 months ago, and he'd been so focused on providing financial security, he'd forgotten about the other kinds of nourishment a child needed. "She sounds pretty smart," he said. "She is. And Malik knows everything about bugs. Did you know beetles can lift 50 times their own weight? That's like you lifting a whole car." As Emma chattered about her new friend, Carter found his gaze drifting back to the kitchen. Rochelle was humming something low and sweet while she worked, Malik dancing slightly to her rhythm. The scene looked like something from a different life, warmer, more real than the sterile perfection he'd built around himself. His phone buzzed. "Candace, where are you?" The florist needs decisions about centerpieces. This wedding won't plan itself, right? The wedding. 3 weeks away. The life he was supposed to want. But watching Rochelle teach his niece about family recipes and Malik show Emma his beetle facts, Carter felt like he was observing someone else's future through a window, and he wasn't sure he wanted to be on the outside anymore. That evening, after Emma and Malik were asleep, he found Rochelle in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner. Steam rose from his coffee cup as he approached, and she looked up from loading the dishwasher. "Everything okay with Emma?" she asked. "I know this is all new for her. She's happier than I've seen her since." He didn't finish the sentence. "Since her parents died. Since her world shattered. Thank you for making her feel like family." "She is family." Rochelle straightened, wiping her hands on a towel. "And family takes care of family." She reached for the same cabinet handle he was approaching, her body pressing briefly against his back as they both tried to access the shelf. The scent of her skin, cocoa butter, and something uniquely her made him forget his own name. She went still, and he could feel the warmth of her breath between his shoulder blades. "Sorry," she whispered, but neither of them moved. The moment stretched, electric and dangerous, until Malik's voice called from down the hall. "Mama, I had a bad dream." She stepped back quickly, the spell broken. "I should, of course." But as she walked away, Carter's hand trembled around his coffee cup. He'd felt that kind of recognition before, that pull, that sense of finding something he hadn't known he'd lost. What's more dangerous, remembering something you want to forget, or forgetting something you need to remember? Drop your thoughts below. The next morning, Malik drew a picture during breakfast. A family scene with stick figures under a rainbow. When he handed it to Carter, pointing at the tallest figure, his words hit like a physical blow. "That's the man who looks like me." Carter stared at the drawing, at the birthmark Malik had carefully colored in the exact spot where Carter's own scar lay hidden beneath expensive shirts. The coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering against marble floor like the sound of a life about to break wide open. Some cities hold your secrets better than others, until the day those secrets follow you home. Carter's hands shook as he spread the private investigator's report across his mahogany desk. Each page felt like evidence of his own destruction. Birmingham addresses, employment records, a sister's name that made his chest tighten with recognition he'd been trying to ignore. Denise Davis. The name hit him like cold water, washing away 6 years of carefully buried memories. The hotel bar. The woman with sad eyes and a soft Alabama accent who'd listened to his failures without judgment. The night they'd found comfort in each other's brokenness. No questions asked, no promises made. Rochelle's sister. His office door opened without warning, and there she was, the woman who'd been haunting his thoughts, making him question everything he thought he wanted. She moved through his private space like she belonged there, checking the plants by his window with the same gentle attention she gave Emma and Malik. "I knocked," she said without turning around, fingers gentle on the leaves of his dying ficus. "You didn't answer. This poor thing is thirsty. You're not supposed to be in here." His voice came out rougher than intended as he quickly shuffled the papers into a drawer. "Emma wanted to show you her math homework. She's proud of getting all the multiplication problems right." Rochelle finally faced him, and something in his expression made her pause. "What's wrong?" "Everything. Nothing." His entire world shifting on its axis because a 5-year-old boy had his eyes and his sister had once shared his bed during the worst night of his life. "Just business," he lied. She moved closer, and he caught that scent again, cocoa butter and warmth that transported him back to a hotel room where two strangers had helped each other forget their pain. "You look like you've seen a ghost." If only she knew. "Tell me about your sister," he said quietly. The words hung between them like a blade. Rochelle's entire body went still, her warm expression cooling into something guarded and protective. "What about her?" "You never mentioned her when I asked about family. Just said it was you and Malik. Some family you keep close. Some you keep at a distance for good reason." She crossed her arms, her professional mask sliding into place. "Denise made choices that hurt people. I won't let her choices affect my son." What kind of choices? The kind that get you fired from corporate jobs in Atlanta. The kind that make you disappear for months at a time, then show up expecting money and forgiveness. Her voice carried old hurt, old anger. She worked for a tech company there. Some trouble with her supervisor. Sexual harassment, she claimed, but what? But Denise has a talent for finding powerful men to blame when her life falls apart. The words came out sharp, then she seemed to realize what she'd said. I'm sorry. That's not your concern. But it was his concern because suddenly pieces were clicking together like a puzzle he didn't want to solve. His company had acquired a smaller Atlanta firm 5 years ago. He'd spent weeks down there, handling the integration, dealing with personnel issues, and there'd been complaints, settlements, NDAs signed to protect the company's reputation. What was the supervisor's name? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Rochelle's eyes narrowed. Why do you care? Just curious. Carter Whitmore. She said it like it tasted bitter. Some rich boy who thought his money meant he could take whatever he wanted from women who needed their jobs. The room went silent except for the sound of his heart hammering against his ribs. 6 years of suppressed memory crashed over him like a wave. Not just that night in Birmingham, but the complaints that followed. The woman who'd accused him of using his position to coerce her. The NDAs his lawyers had insisted on. The settlements paid to make problems disappear. He remembered Denise now. The accusations that had nearly destroyed his reputation before money and lawyers buried them. But that night in Birmingham, that had been months later, when he'd been broken and seeking absolution in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Had she planned it even then? The sister of the woman he'd allegedly wronged, finding him in his lowest moment? Weren't you telling me? Rochelle's voice cut through his racing thoughts. Nothing that matters now. Everything matters when it comes to my son. She stepped closer, fire in her eyes. I spent 5 years protecting him from other people's mistakes. If you're keeping something from me, I'm not keeping anything from you. But they both knew he was lying. Have you ever discovered someone in your life had hidden connections to your past? How did you handle that betrayal of trust? That night, after Rochelle and Malik had gone to bed, Carter sat alone in his office, staring at Malik's drawing. The little boy who called him the man who looks like me. The child who had his birthmark, his eyes, his smile. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Some secrets are worth keeping. Some are worth revealing. Choose wisely. The phone number was blocked, but the message was crystal clear. Someone else knew about Malik. Someone else knew about Birmingham. Someone else knew about Denise. Someone was watching, and they were running out of time. She planned the perfect wedding while falling in love with the wrong man, and he counted down to a future that might not exist. 2 weeks until the wedding, and Candace had transformed the penthouse into a war room of wedding planning. Sample centerpieces covered every surface, fabric swatches draped over furniture, and her laptop showed 17 different spreadsheets tracking everything from seating charts to social media timing. The photographer wants the groomsmen shots at golden hour, she announced without looking up from her phone, where she was editing engagement photos for her Instagram story. And remember, the cathedral has that ridiculous no phones policy during the ceremony, so we'll need to rely on the professional shots for content. Carter nodded absently, his attention drawn to the kitchen where Rochelle was helping Malik and Emma with homework. Her laugh drifted over the chaos of wedding planning like music in a storm, and something in his chest pulled tight. Are you even listening? Candace's voice cut sharp. Of course. Then what did I just say about the reception timeline? He had no idea. For the past week, he'd been going through the motions of wedding preparation while his mind raced with possibilities he couldn't voice. The DNA test kit he'd ordered sat hidden in his office drawer like a loaded weapon, waiting for courage he couldn't find. I said the band needs our first dance song by tomorrow, and you still haven't chosen one. Candace finally looked at him, irritation creasing her perfectly made-up face. This is our wedding, Carter. The biggest day of our lives. Could you at least pretend to care? The biggest day of our lives. The words should have stirred something in him. Excitement, anticipation, love. Instead, they felt like a countdown to his execution. What about At Last? He suggested, the first song that came to mind. Etta James? Really? Candace rolled her eyes. That's so basic. I was thinking something more contemporary, more Instagram-worthy. Everything came back to Instagram with her. Their entire relationship filtered through phone screens and likes and comments from strangers who thought they knew their love story. I need some air, Carter said, heading for the terrace. The Seattle skyline stretched out below him, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. Behind him, through the glass doors, he could see his two worlds colliding. Candace arranging place cards with military precision, while Rochelle helped the kids build a blanket fort in the living room. The contrast was striking. One woman who turned their life into content, another who made their house feel like home. His phone buzzed. Another block number. 2 weeks left to tell the truth. Or should I? Before he could process the threat fully, the terrace door slid open. Rochelle stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool air. Emma wanted me to ask if you're okay. She said you looked sad. Kids saw everything adults try to hide. Just thinking about the wedding. Pre-wedding nerves are normal. But something in her voice sounded forced, like she was reciting lines from a script she didn't believe. Are they? He turned to face her, and in the city lights reflecting off the glass buildings, she looked like something from a dream. What if you're about to marry the wrong person? The question hung between them, dangerous and honest. Rochelle's eyes widened, but she didn't step away. Then you stop the wedding, she said quietly. Even if it hurts people? Even if it ruins everything you've built? Carter, his name on her lips, sounded like a prayer and a warning. You can ask me questions like that. Why not? Because I might answer them. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and risk. Below them, the city hummed with life, but up here, 42 floors above the world, it felt like they were the only two people who existed. He stepped closer. She should have stepped back, but she didn't. What would you answer? His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. I'd say that loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if it's not with you. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the city lights. I'd say that some mistakes are worth making, and some risks are worth taking. And I'd say that some people are worth changing your entire life for. The space between them disappeared like smoke. His hand found her face, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone, and she leaned into the touch like she'd been waiting for it her whole life. This is wrong, she whispered. I know. His forehead touched hers. But nothing else has ever felt this right. When have you wanted something you knew could destroy everything you'd built? When does following your heart become worth the risk? The kiss was inevitable, soft, tentative, then desperate as 5 days of tension and longing poured out between them. She tasted like hope and heartbreak, like everything he'd been missing without knowing it was gone. Inside, Candace called his name, her voice cutting through the moment like glass. They broke apart, breathing hard, the weight of what they'd just done settling over them like lead. We can't, Rochelle whispered, backing toward the door. But as she disappeared inside, Carter knew it was already too late. He was falling, had been falling since the moment she walked into his life, carrying secrets that could destroy them both. 2 weeks until his wedding, and he'd just kissed another woman. 2 weeks until everything he'd built came crashing down. The blocked number texted again. Interesting timing. The photographer got some beautiful shots tonight. Someone was watching. Someone had been watching all along. And time was running out. The test results arrived on the same day the wedding invitations were mailed. Timing that felt like cosmic justice or cruel irony. Carter stared at the lab report, his hands trembling as Seattle rain painted gray patterns on the windows. The numbers blurred together, but one line stood out clear as day. 99.9% probability of paternity. Malik was his son. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays, first days of school, scraped knees, and bedtime stories that belonged to him. 5 years of a little boy growing up without his father because Carter had been too drunk and broken to remember the most important night of his life. The Birmingham hotel room came flooding back in devastating detail now. Not Rochelle, Denise. Her sister. The woman who'd accused him of harassment, who'd taken his settlement money and disappeared, who'd been carrying his child and never told him. But why was Rochelle here? Why now? 2 weeks before his wedding. A soft knock interrupted his spiral. Emma peeked around his office door, Malik right behind her, both kids covered in finger paint from their afternoon art project. "Uncle Carter, we made you something," Emma announced, holding up a paper covered in handprints. Hers in pink, Malik's in blue. "It's a family tree," Malik explained, his voice shy but proud. "Emma's hands are the leaves, and mine are the roots, and we left space for grown-up hands too." Carter's throat closed up as he knelt to their level. "It's beautiful, buddy." "Miss Rochelle says families come in all shapes," Emma added. "Some are made by blood, some by choice, but they're all real if the love is real." The innocence in their voices, the way Malik looked at him with trust and admiration. It hit Carter like a physical blow. This child had been living in his home for weeks, calling him the man who looks like me, and Carter had been too scared to see what was right in front of him. His son, his actual son. "I need to talk to your mom," he told Malik, his voice rougher than intended. 20 minutes later, Rochelle found him on the terrace where they'd kissed 3 days ago. She moved carefully, like approaching a wounded animal, settling into the chair across from him without a word. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. The question hung between them like a blade. Rochelle's hands twisted in her lap, and when she finally looked at him, her eyes were full of pain he'd been too blind to recognize. "About what?" she whispered, but they both knew the pretending was over. "About Malik being mine." The admission shattered something between them. Rochelle closed her eyes, tears spilling over, and Carter felt his heart break watching her struggle with secrets that had been eating her alive. "Since the day we arrived," she said finally. "Since you crouched down to talk to him and I saw your face next to his. Since he drew that picture with the birthmark in exactly the right place." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared." The words came out broken, honest. "Because Denise made me promise never to tell you. Because I didn't know if you were the kind of man who'd want him or the kind who'd try to take him away from me." Carter's chest tightened. "And now I'm more scared because I know you're the kind of man he deserves, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to share him." The vulnerability in her voice undid him. He reached across the space between them, covering her hands with his, feeling how they shook against his palms. "He's not something to be shared, Rochelle. He's our son. Our son." The words tasted foreign and perfect on his tongue. "What about your wedding?" she asked. "Your life? Candace?" Carter looked through the glass doors where Candace sat surrounded by wedding magazines and vendor contracts, planning a future that felt like it belonged to someone else. Then he looked at Rochelle, the woman who'd brought his son home, who'd made his house feel like a family. "What would you do if you discovered you were a parent to a child you never knew existed?" Share your thoughts about this impossible situation. The anonymous text arrived as they sat in silence. "Tell him the truth, or I will. The wedding is in 10 days. Choose." Someone else knew. Someone was watching, waiting, ready to detonate their lives at the worst possible moment. "There's something else," Carter said quietly. "Someone's been texting me, threatening to expose everything." Rochelle's face went pale. "Denise, you think it's your sister?" "I know it is." Her voice carried old hurt, old fear. "She always said she'd make you pay for what you did to her. I thought moving here, taking this job, I thought I could protect Malik from her anger. But I just delivered him right to her target." The rain picked up, drumming against the windows like a countdown. 10 days until the wedding. 10 days until everything exploded. 10 days to decide if he was brave enough to choose love over reputation, family over fortune, truth over the comfortable lies he'd been living. The past has a way of weaponizing itself, especially when it wears the face of someone you once trusted. Denise Davis stood in the penthouse lobby like a storm given human form, her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair a sharp contrast to the fury burning in her eyes. The doorman had called up for permission, and Carter's blood had turned to ice at her name. 5 years of rage and righteousness walked through his front door, and suddenly the anonymous text made perfect sense. "Hello, Carter." Her voice was silk wrapped around steel, the same Alabama accent as Rochelle, but harder, colder. "Long time no see." Candace looked up from her wedding planning command center, confusion creasing her forehead. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Someone with a very interesting story about your fiancé." Denise's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. But first, where's my sister? I've come a long way to have a family reunion. Rochelle appeared from the kitchen, Malik and Emma trailing behind her, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The sisters faced each other across the marble floor like gunfighters at high noon. What do you want, Denise? Well, I've always wanted justice. Denise's gaze moved to Malik, who pressed closer to his mother's side, sensing danger. Hello, baby boy. You look so much like your daddy. The words landed like grenades. Candace's head snapped toward Carter, confusion shifting to horror as pieces clicked together. Emma looked between the adults, scared by the tension she didn't understand. Kids, go to your room, Rochelle said quietly, never taking her eyes off her sister. But Mama... Now, Malik. Emma took his hand and led him away, but Carter caught the little boy looking back over his shoulder, fear in those eyes that looked so much like his own. What do you want? Carter asked when the children were gone. What you owe me. Denise pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. 5 years of child support for starters. Medical bills, childcare, educational expenses, plus interest and damages for emotional distress. You never told me about him. You never asked what happened after you threw money at me to disappear. Her voice turned vicious. Did you think your lawyers and NDAs made the consequences disappear too? Did you think you could ruin my career, destroy my reputation, and there wouldn't be payback? Wait, hold on. Candace stood up, her phone forgotten for once. What is she talking about? Carter. Who is this woman? Someone your perfect fiancé sexually harassed 6 years ago. Denise said before Carter could answer. Someone he paid to stay quiet about it. Someone whose sister he knocked up and forgot about. The room exploded into chaos. Candace started screaming questions Carter couldn't answer. Rochelle stepped between him and Denise, like a human shield. And through it all, Denise stood calm as a hurricane's eye, watching her bombs detonate with satisfaction. You want money? Carter's voice cut through the noise. Fine, name your price. $10 million. Cash. Or I hold a press conference tomorrow morning and tell the world about your son, your history, and every dirty secret I've been collecting for 5 years. 10 million. Candace's voice cracked. Carter, what the hell is going on? But Carter wasn't looking at his fiancée anymore. He was looking at Rochelle, seeing the pain and betrayal in her eyes as she realized how deep the deception went. You used me, she whispered. You brought me here knowing. God, I'm so stupid. Rochelle, no, it wasn't like that. Wasn't it? Denise's laugh was cold. Tell her about Birmingham, Carter. Tell her about the hotel room where you cried on my shoulder about your daddy issues and your failing company. Tell her how you were so drunk you didn't even remember my name the next morning. When family asks you to choose between loyalty and love, what guides your decision? Have you ever been torn between protecting someone and doing what's right? The truth hung in the air like poison. Carter watched Rochelle's face crumble as she understood the full scope of the betrayal. Not just his, but her sister's too. This was all planned, Rochelle said, the words barely audible. The job posting. Finding me. Bringing us here. You've been planning this for 5 years. Someone had to think about that boy's future, Denise replied, since his father was too busy playing house with Instagram models to care. As Denise left with her ultimatum, she dropped one final bomb. Ask your lover about the other women, Rochelle. Ask her how many others took his money to stay quiet. The door slammed, leaving silence and the weight of implications that would destroy them all. Truth has a way of demanding to be heard. Even when speaking, it means losing everything you've discovered you can't live without. The penthouse felt like a tomb after Denise left. Candace had locked herself in their bedroom, her sobs audible through the walls between frantic phone calls to her mother, her wedding planner, anyone who might help her process the catastrophe her perfect life had become. Carter found Rochelle on the terrace, staring out at the city lights that blurred through her tears like watercolors running together. She didn't turn when he joined her, didn't acknowledge his presence at all. How many? She asked finally, her voice hollow. How many what? Other women, other settlements, other lives you've destroyed with your money and your lawyers. The question hit him like a physical blow because he'd been asking himself the same thing for years, trying to forget the faces and names that haunted his climb to success. 3, he said quietly, including your sister. She flinched like he'd slapped her. 3 women whose careers you ended. 3 families you tore apart. It wasn't, God, Rochelle, it wasn't like that. I never forced anyone, never threatened anyone's job, but the power imbalance. I was young and stupid and thought money could fix anything. Even rape? The word hung between them like a blade. Carter's stomach lurched, but he forced himself to meet her eyes. I never raped anyone, but I made choices that hurt people. I used my position in ways that were wrong, even if they felt consensual at the time. I paid the settlements because I knew I'd crossed lines, even if I didn't force anyone across them. The city lights blurred as she listened to him catalog his mistakes. Each confession a stone thrown at the castle they'd been building in the clouds. But he owed her the truth, all of it, even if it destroyed them. The night with Denise. I was drunk, broken. My company was failing. My father's voice was in my head telling me I'd never amount to anything. She was in the hotel bar, crying about her own problems. We were 2 wounded people who found each other in the dark. And you forgot her name by morning. I forgot everything by morning. The whole night was a blur until I saw Malik's face. He moved closer, desperate to make her understand. But I remembered her pain. I remembered wanting to help someone else hurt less than I was hurting. So you threw money at her and walked away. So I made the same mistake I always made, thinking wealth could solve what my actions had broken. Rochelle finally turned to face him, and the devastation in her eyes nearly brought him to his knees. This woman who'd fought for everything she had, who'd raised his son alone while he lived in ignorant luxury, looking at him like he was everything wrong with the world. How many others were there? She demanded, her voice getting stronger with anger. Women who needed jobs, needed money, needed hope, and you took advantage of that need. His silence was answer enough. I loved you, she whispered, the past tense hitting harder than any accusation. I actually loved you. Despite everything I knew about men like you, despite every warning sign, I let myself believe you were different. The admission broke something in his chest. I'm different. With you, I'm different. No. She shook her head, backing away from him. You're exactly who you've always been. I was just stupid enough to think I could change you. Can you separate who someone was from who they've become? When does a person's past disqualify them from their future? Tell me your thoughts. But even as the words destroyed him, Carter couldn't stop himself from reaching for her. His hands found her face, thumbs wiping away tears that kept falling. And instead of pulling away, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him down to her. The kiss was angry, desperate, full of pain and betrayal and love that refused to die even when it should. She kissed him like she was trying to memorize his taste before forgetting his name, nails digging into his shoulders as if she could hold him and push him away simultaneously. I hate you, she whispered against his mouth. I know. I hate that I love you. I know. They stumbled inside, hands tearing at clothes with desperate hunger, making love like the world was ending. Because for them, it was. Every touch carried the weight of goodbye. Every kiss tasted like regret and longing and the death of dreams they'd barely dared to hope for. Afterward, she packed their bags with mechanical precision while Malik slept, but his innocent drawing on the dresser stopped her cold. My family, stick figures of her, Malik and Carter under a house-shaped heart. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that fairy tales don't exist? And sometimes loving someone means leaving them behind. She tried to run from a love that felt like betrayal, until her son asked a question that changed everything. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport buzzed with travelers rushing toward their futures while Rochelle sat frozen in a departure gate chair, watching flights to Birmingham leave every hour. Their bags sat beside her like accusations, everything they owned in the world packed and ready to go home. But home felt like a foreign concept now. Birmingham meant going back to waiting tables and scraping together rent money. Birmingham meant explaining to Malik why they'd left the only stability he'd ever known. Birmingham meant pretending the last 3 weeks hadn't changed everything about who she thought she was. Mama, why are we at the airport? Malik pressed against her side, his small hand clutching the tablet Carter had bought him, loaded with educational games and e-books that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. We're going home, baby. But our home is with Uncle Carter and Emma. His voice held that stubborn logic only children possessed. I don't want to go back to the old place. Mrs. Henderson downstairs always smells like cats, and the refrigerator makes scary noises. Rochelle's chest tightened. The old apartment in Birmingham, 1 bedroom, thin walls, heat that barely worked in winter. She'd been so proud of providing for Malik on her own, but seeing him in Carter's world had shown her what she'd been unable to give him. Space to run, books to read, a man who looked like him and made him laugh. A father. Sometimes we have to leave good things behind, she said, the words tasting like ash. Why? Because your father is a man who uses his power to hurt women. Because I fell in love with someone I can't trust. Because staying means watching your son grow up in a world built on lies and settlements and money that covers up pain. Because it's complicated, baby. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Flight 447 to Birmingham, Alabama. Now boarding all passengers. Rochelle stood, reaching for their carry-on bag, when Malik planted himself in the chair and crossed his arms. I'm not going. Malik, we don't have a choice. Yes, we do. His dark eyes, so much like Carter's, blazed with determination. We can choose to stay with our family. He's not our family. Yes, he is. Malik's voice cracked, and suddenly he wasn't trying to be brave anymore. He reads me bedtime stories with different voices for all the characters. He taught me how to tie my shoes. He looked at me like Daddy used to look at you in the pictures. The words hit her like a physical blow. Malik had no memory of his father. She'd been single his entire conscious life. But somehow he understood what he'd been missing, what Carter had given him in just 3 weeks. He makes you smile, Mama. Really smile, Not the pretend kind you do when you think I'm not looking. Have you ever tried to run from something good because accepting it felt like betraying your values? Share your experience with moral conflicts. Before she could respond, a commotion near the security checkpoint caught her attention. Carter appeared, still in his business suit, moving through the crowd like a man possessed. When he spotted them, relief flooded his features. "Don't go." He stopped in front of them, breathing hard. "Please, just don't go." "Carter, what are you doing here?" "Something I should have done 6 years ago. Something I should have done the day you walked into my life." He pulled out a manila envelope, hands shaking as he held it out to her. "Malik's birth certificate, with my name on it. Legal recognition. Child support retroactive to his birth. And this." The second document made her heart stop. Adoption papers. Legal guardianship. Her parental rights protected. His acknowledged, their son's future secured. "I called off the wedding," he said quietly. "Candace is, well, she's handling it about as well as you'd expect. But that's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" "Because that little boy deserves to know his father. Because you deserve better than running away from something real. Because I've made mistakes. Because I love you both, and I'm tired of being the kind of man who lets fear make his choices for him." Malik broke away from her hand and ran to Carter, wrapping small arms around his legs. "Don't let Mama take me away," he sobbed. "I know you're my daddy. I know you love us." The words echoed through the crowded terminal, drawing stares from other travelers, but Carter didn't care. He lifted Malik into his arms, holding him tight as the boy cried against his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere, buddy," he whispered. "If your mama will let me, I'm going to be right here." Rochelle watched her son find safety in his father's arms, watched Carter become the man she'd hoped he could be, and felt something break open in her chest. Not breaking apart, breaking open. Like a seed that had been waiting for the right conditions to finally grow. The boarding call came again, final boarding for Birmingham. For the first time in 5 years, Rochelle Davis walked away from a departure gate instead of through it. She'd planned the perfect wedding, until she discovered her groom's perfect secret and decided if she couldn't have love, she'd settle for revenge. The penthouse looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Wedding magazines scattered across marble floors, vendor contracts ripped in half. The 3-tier cake design Candace had spent months perfecting crumpled and thrown against the wall like confetti. She sat in the center of the destruction, still in her silk pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of a general planning battle. Her Instagram story showed nothing but motivational quotes about rising from ashes and choosing yourself first. But behind the inspirational facade, something much darker was brewing. "You canceled the flowers too?" her assistant asked nervously, standing in the doorway with a tablet full of vendor confirmations. "Cancel everything. Venue, band, photographer, the works." Candace's voice was steady, controlled, dangerous. "But keep the guest list. I'm going to need it." The assistant shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, the deposits. Let him worry about the money. He's good at throwing money at problems." She looked up from her phone, and her smile could have cut glass. "I have a different kind of event to plan now." For 3 days, she'd been making calls. To tabloid journalists who specialized in scandal. To society bloggers who thrived on watching the powerful fall. To every media contact she'd cultivated during her influencer career, promising them the story that would define Seattle's social season. The wealthy tech mogul's secret son. The pattern of harassment and settlements. The nanny who was actually his baby mama, hired under false pretenses. The wedding canceled when everything exploded. It was social media gold, and Candace knew exactly how to mine it. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Interested in comparing notes about Carter Whitmore? I have photos you might find useful." Denise, Carter's other victim, offering alliance in destruction. They met at a downtown coffee shop, 2 women united by their hatred for the same man, planning his downfall with the precision of master strategists. "I want him financially ruined," Denise said, sliding a folder across the table. "Lawsuits, investigations, criminal charges if possible. I want his company to collapse and his reputation to burn." "I want him socially destroyed," Candace replied, examining the photos. Carter and Rochelle on the terrace, their kiss captured in perfect detail. I want him to become a pariah. I want his son to grow up ashamed of his father's name. So we're in agreement. Complete annihilation. With one addition. Candace's smile turned predatory. I want the reveal to be public. Humiliating. I want 200 witnesses to see his world collapse. What did you have in mind? The wedding was supposed to be this Saturday. All the guests, all the media coverage already arranged. What if instead of a celebration, they got a confession? Denise leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. I'll tell everyone I discovered his secret and called off the wedding. Then I'll invite his family to join us. Let the little boy see his daddy get destroyed in front of Seattle's elite. Let Rochelle watch the man she loves become the most hated person in the room. Have you ever witnessed someone choose destruction over healing? When does protecting your pride become more important than truth? By Thursday, the plan was in motion. Candace sent new invitations, not for a wedding, but for a celebration of truth and new beginnings. The wording was vague enough to ensure attendance, while promising drama juicy enough to guarantee media coverage. She arranged for Malik to be present, telling Rochelle it was a family gathering to discuss their future. She scheduled photographers to document every moment of Carter's humiliation. She even wrote a speech about standing up to powerful men who think money can buy silence. The only thing left was choosing her outfit. Something that said victim, but also survivor. Something that would photograph beautifully when she stood over the ruins of Carter Whitmore's life. Saturday morning, she stood in front of her mirror applying the final touches of makeup. In 6 hours, the cathedral would be packed with Seattle's most influential people. In 6 hours, Carter would face the consequences of thinking he could have everything. In 6 hours, she would have her revenge. But as she practiced her speech one more time, Candace didn't notice the second car that had been following her all week. She didn't see the private investigator Carter had hired documenting her meetings with Denise, her calls to reporters, her methodical planning of his destruction. She thought she was the hunter, but she was about to discover that sometimes the prey knows how to fight back. The wedding program went to print with a special edition Candace had requested, a dedication to all the families represented here today. She smiled, knowing some families were about to be revealed in ways no one expected. What she didn't know was that Carter had added his own surprise to the program, one that would turn her moment of triumph into her own public reckoning.
They spent their last night before the storm holding each other like they could stop time, or at least slow it down enough to memorize forever. Friday evening painted Seattle in shades of gold and shadow as Carter sat on his office floor, building Lego castles with Malik, while Emma added princesses and dragons to their creation. Rochelle watched from the doorway, her heart breaking and healing at the same time as she saw her son finally have what every child deserved, a father who showed up. The dragon has to protect the castle, not attack it, Malik explained seriously, positioning the plastic beast near the front gate. Because sometimes the scary things are actually keeping you safe. Carter's hands stilled. That's pretty wise, buddy. Mama taught me that. She says people think dragons are mean, but they're just misunderstood. Across the room, Rochelle's eyes met Carter's, and something passed between them. Understanding, forgiveness, hope wrapped in fear. Tomorrow would bring chaos, public judgment, and consequences none of them could predict. But tonight they were family. Bath time, Rochelle announced when the castle was complete, and both kids groaned in unison. 5 more minutes, Emma pleaded. Mama said bath time, Malik said, standing up and taking him his hand. Come on, we gotta listen to our parents. Our parents. The words hit Carter like a gift he didn't deserve but would treasure forever. Later, After bedtime stories and tucked-in children, Carter found Rochelle on the terrace where everything between them had started. The rehearsal dinner sounds drifted up from restaurants below. Laughter, music, celebration of futures that would unfold according to plan. "Tomorrow's going to be ugly," she said without looking at him. "I know. The media will tear us apart. Candace has photographers, reporters, probably live stream coverage of your destruction. I know. Malik will see it all. He'll hear what people say about you, about us. He'll grow up with those images burned into his memory." Carter moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, feeling her lean back against his chest despite everything. "What would you do differently?" he asked. "If you could go back, would you change meeting me? Would you take that job in Miami instead?" She was quiet, so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft as prayer. "I'd change your past. I'd make you a man who never hurt anyone, never needed to buy forgiveness, never created victims." Her hands covered his arms, holding him to her. "But I wouldn't change meeting you. Even knowing what's coming, I wouldn't change loving you." The admission destroyed him. This woman who had every reason to hate him, who could have taken their son and disappeared, choosing to stand beside him when the world burned down. "I don't deserve you." "No," she agreed. "But Malik deserves his father. And maybe people can change. Maybe love is strong enough to build something new on top of old mistakes." When you know something beautiful is about to be tested, how do you hold on to hope? Share your experience with loving through uncertainty. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, every touch carrying the weight of goodbye and the promise of forever. She moved above him in the moonlight filtering through Seattle's skyline, her hands on his chest, her eyes never leaving his face. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "I want you to remember this. Remember that you were loved. Remember that you chose truth over comfort, family over reputation." "I love you," he breathed against her throat, tasting salt from tears he didn't know were falling. "I love you too. All of you. Even the broken parts that got us here." Saturday morning came too soon. Carter stood at his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for what should have been his wedding day. Instead of nervous excitement, he felt something like peace. Strange, considering he was about to face public humiliation, potential criminal charges, and the destruction of everything he'd built. But in the reflection behind him, he could see Malik's artwork taped to the wall, stick figures of their family under a rainbow heart. Whatever the cost, he'd gained something worth more than reputation or money. He'd found his son. He'd found love. He'd found the man he should have been all along. On his desk lay 3 envelopes. His resignation from the company, a statement accepting full responsibility for his past actions, and a trust fund for Malik that would secure his future regardless of what happened to Carter. As dawn broke over Seattle, only one question remained. Would he survive the storm long enough to become the father and man his family deserved? The cathedral bells began to ring, calling 200 guests to witness what they thought would be a wedding. Instead, they were about to get front-row seats to the most spectacular reckoning Seattle society had ever seen. 200 guests expected to witness a union. Instead, they got a front-row seat to the most spectacular implosion of the social season. The cathedral gleamed with morning light streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors where Seattle's elite gathered in their finest clothes. Crystal chandeliers reflected off silk dresses and diamond jewelry as guests whispered about the unusual invitation, a celebration of truth and new beginnings, rather than a traditional wedding ceremony. Carter stood at the altar in his black tuxedo, but instead of nervous anticipation, his face carried the calm of a man who'd already made peace with his fate. Behind him, the altar was decorated not with wedding flowers, but with blown-up photographs, images Candace had carefully selected to document his fall. The string quartet played soft, delicate notes as Candace walked down the aisle in a stunning white dress that should have been for celebration, but felt more like a costume for revenge. She carried a microphone instead of flowers, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the cathedral's sound system. Thank you for joining me on what should have been my wedding day. Instead, you're here to witness something far more important: the power of truth. The crowd murmured, sensing drama but not yet understanding its scope. Camera phones lifted despite the supposed no recording policy, because this felt like the kind of moment that would define Seattle's social history. Some of you know Carter Whitmore as a successful businessman, a philanthropist, a pillar of our community. Candace's voice carried the false sweetness of poison wrapped in honey. But the man I was about to marry has been hiding secrets that would shock you all. That's when the side door opened, and Denise walked in with a photographer, both of them moving with military precision toward the front of the cathedral. "I'd like you all to meet Denise Davis," Candace continued, gesturing toward her co-conspirator. "One of several women my former fiancé sexually harassed and paid to stay silent about it." Gasps echoed through the cathedral. Board members from Carter's company sat forward in their pews. Society reporters started taking notes furiously. But Carter remained calm, watching the show unfold with something that looked almost like relief. "And now," Candace announced, her voice rising with theatrical triumph, "I'd like to introduce you to his biggest secret of all, the family he's been hiding right under your noses." The cathedral doors burst open, and Rochelle entered with Malik beside her, both of them dressed in their best clothes but looking terrified by the crowd of staring faces. This wasn't what she'd expected when Candace invited them to a family meeting. "Say hello to Carter's secret son," Candace proclaimed. "The child he abandoned for 5 years while the mother struggled to survive on minimum wage jobs." But that's when everything went wrong for Candace's carefully orchestrated revenge. Malik looked around at all the staring faces, at the photographers taking pictures, at the woman pointing at him like he was evidence in a trial. His small face crumpled with confusion and fear, and he did what any 5-year-old would do when scared. He ran to safety. "Daddy!" The word echoed through the cathedral like a gunshot. 200 guests turned to watch a little boy with Carter's exact features run down the marble aisle, his arms outstretched toward the man he trusted to protect him. Have you ever seen someone choose truth over comfort? When have you witnessed courage in the face of public judgment? Carter didn't hesitate. He stepped down from the altar and caught Malik in his arms, lifting him up as camera flashes exploded like lightning around them. The crowd parted as he walked down the aisle, not to his bride, but to his son, lifting Malik into his arms as cameras captured the moment his old life died and his real one began. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered against Malik's ear as the little boy clung to him. "Daddy's here. I'm not going anywhere." The word, "Daddy," said with such trust and love, silenced even Candace's prepared speech. This wasn't the dramatic exposure she'd planned. This was a father and son finding each other in front of the world, and somehow that truth was more powerful than all her revenge. As they escaped through the cathedral's back exit, reporters shouting questions behind them, Denise waited by their car with one final revelation that would change everything again. "There's something else you need to know," she called out, her voice carrying something that sounded almost like regret. "Something about why I really brought Rochelle here. Something about the night you don't remember. Some truths are worth destroying your life for. Others are worth building a new one around." In the parking lot behind the cathedral, with reporters trying to scale the fence and helicopters circling overhead, Denise Davis finally told the whole truth. "That night in Birmingham," she began, her voice shaking in a way it hadn't inside when she'd been destroying Carter's life. "You want to know what really happened? I'll tell you." Rochelle held Malik close, trying to shield him from the chaos, while Carter stood like a man facing execution, waiting for the final blow. "I was there because I'd lost everything," Denise continued. "My job, my reputation, my faith in justice. Your lawyers had buried my harassment complaint so deep it might as well have never happened. I was drinking away what little money the settlement had left me, and you walked into that bar looking just as broken as I felt." The hotel room memory came flooding back to Carter in devastating clarity. Not the predatory power play Denise had described to the media, but two shattered people finding each other in their lowest moment. "You cried," Denise said, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of sirens. The great Carter Whitmore, sitting in a dive bar, crying about how your father never believed in you, how your company was failing, how you felt like a fraud who'd inherited success instead of earning it. Carter remembered now, the weight of failure crushing him, the bottle of whiskey that promised to numb the pain, the stranger who'd listened without judgment. We talked for hours about your dreams, my anger, the different ways life had broken us both. When we went upstairs, it wasn't about power or money or silence. It was about two people trying to feel less alone. Then why? Rochelle's voice cracked. Why the lies? Why make him the villain? Because when I found out I was pregnant, I called his office, left messages, sent letters. His assistants blocked my calls. His lawyers sent cease and desist orders. I was just another problem to be managed, another settlement to be negotiated. Carter's face went white. I never got those messages. I swear to God, Denise, I never knew. I know that now. Tears streamed down her face. But for 5 years, I thought you'd abandoned your son on purpose. I thought you were the kind of man who'd walk away from his own blood to protect his reputation. So you brought Rochelle here for revenge. I brought Rochelle here because Malik deserved to know his father, and she deserved to stop struggling alone. But I also wanted you to suffer the way I'd suffered. I wanted you to fall in love with them and then lose them when the truth came out. How do you rebuild trust when the foundation was flawed from the beginning? Share your thoughts on second chances and honest starts. The three adults stood in stunned silence as the weight of 5 years of misunderstanding settled over them. Malik, sensing the shift in tension, looked up at Carter with worried eyes. Are you still my daddy? The question broke something open in all of them. Carter knelt to Malik's level, taking his small hands in his own. I'm your daddy forever, buddy. No matter what anyone says, no matter what happens, I will always be your daddy. And you love Mama too? I love your mama more than anything in the world. Then why is everyone so mad? From the mouths of babes. Why were they all so mad when love had found a way to bloom despite the mistakes and misunderstandings? Why was the focus on the pain of the past instead of the possibility of the future? Adults make things complicated sometimes, Rochelle said, smoothing Malik's hair. But we're learning to do better. Later that day, after the media storm died down, because that's what they built from the ashes of his reputation and her fear, hope that people can change, that love can heal old wounds, that families come in all shapes and sizes, but they're all real when the commitment is genuine. The evening news still occasionally mentioned the Whitmore scandal, but their neighbors saw them as the couple who helped with community gardens and volunteered at the local school. Malik's classmates knew Carter as the dad who showed up to every soccer game and parent-teacher conference, not the man who'd once made headlines for all the wrong reasons. They'd learned that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to write a better future one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And sometimes that's enough to build a life worth living. The man who once bought silence now lived for the sound of children's laughter echoing through rooms that finally felt like home. 2 years after the cathedral disaster that had destroyed his old life and created his new one, Carter stood in the nursery of their Capitol Hill apartment, painting stars on the ceiling while Hope slept in her crib. Not the expensive constellation projector from his penthouse days, but hand-painted stars that would watch over his daughter the same way love had watched over their unconventional family. Through the thin walls, he could hear Malik helping Rochelle with dinner, their voices mixing with Emma's as she video-called her grandparents. Carter's parents, who'd initially been horrified by the scandal, but had come to adore their grandson and new daughter-in-law. Daddy, can you help me with my math? Malik appeared in the doorway, homework in hand, and Carter's heart still jumped at that word. 2 years, and it never got old. Sure thing, buddy. They settled at the small kitchen table where Carter had learned to do a dozen things his wealthy upbringing had never required. Balance a tight budget, cook meals from scratch, fix leaky faucets, and find joy in simple moments that cost nothing but meant everything. Mrs. Peterson wants us to write about our families for the project, Malik said, pencil poised over paper. Can I write about all of us? Even Aunt Denise. Denise, who ran the foundation with fierce dedication and had slowly become part of their extended family as forgiveness replaced anger, who taught them all that healing isn't linear, that making amends takes time, and that sometimes the people who hurt us need help learning how to love better. Of course, family isn't just blood, remember? I know. Family is who shows up, Malik recited, echoing something Rochelle had taught him. Uncle Carter showed up. Emma shows up. You and Mama show up every day. So what would you do if your biggest mistake led to your greatest blessing? Would you trust that love can transform even the darkest secrets? Tell me in the comments what you believe about second chances and the power of truth. That night, after homework was finished and children were tucked into bed, Carter and Rochelle sat on their small balcony overlooking the neighborhood they'd come to love. No Space Needle views, no marble countertops, but the sound of real life happening around them. Kids playing, neighbors talking, dogs barking, the beautiful noise of a community. Any regrets? He asked, a question that had become their evening ritual. Just one, she said, settling against his side. I regret that it took a scandal for you to discover who you really are. I regret that it took public humiliation for us to find private happiness. You think we would have found each other without the chaos. I think love finds a way, she said, her hand moving to her belly where their daughter stirred. Maybe not the same way, but somehow. Some connections are too strong to ignore forever. He thought about the choices that had led them here. His mistakes, her courage, Denise's complicated journey from victim to ally, even Candace's misguided revenge that had ultimately freed them all from living lies. Hope's moving, Rochelle whispered, and Carter's hand joined hers, feeling their daughter's kicks against her skin. What do you think she'll say about her origin story when she's older? He asked. I think she'll say her parents weren't perfect, but they were honest. I think she'll say love doesn't always look like fairy tales. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness, sometimes like second chances, sometimes like choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Hope settled in the womb, as if agreeing, and Carter knew with certainty that whatever mistakes had brought them together, their children would grow up understanding that families aren't defined by how they begin, but by how they choose to love each other through everything that follows. The most powerful love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two imperfect people choosing each other anyway, building something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before, and teaching the next generation that redemption is always possible when you're brave enough to tell the truth. And that's how a wedding that never happened became the love story that changed everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Do you believe people can truly change? What aspect of Carter and Rochelle's journey touched you most? Was it Malik's innocence in calling out for his daddy? Rochelle's courage in choosing love over safety? Or Carter's transformation from someone who bought silence to someone who lived for truth? Drop a comment telling me. Would you have made the same choices? When someone shows you their worst self, do you run? Or do you stick around to see if they can become their best self? Subscribe for more stories that prove love doesn't always look like Instagram posts and fairy tale endings. Sometimes it looks like messy redemption, public scandals that become private blessings, and families that form in the most unexpected ways. And remember, the most powerful love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone willing to grow, to change, to choose you every single day, even when the world gives them every reason not to. Share this story if you believe in second chances. Share it if you think families come in all shapes and sizes. Share it if you know that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments, wrapped in lessons we never saw coming. Until next time, keep believing in the power of truth, the possibility